Hello everyone. Thank you for clicking on my channel. Here, we dive into family conflicts and the challenges that come with them. If you've ever experienced something similar, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to like the video to support the channel's growth. If there are any mistakes or areas for improvement, feel free to share your feedback in the comments. I truly appreciate you being here and listening. Now let me set the stage. Hello everyone. Thank you for clicking on my channel. Here, we dive into family conflicts and the challenges that come with them. If you've ever experienced something similar, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to like the video to support the channel's growth. If there are any mistakes or areas for improvement, feel free to share your feedback in the comments. I truly appreciate you being here and listening. Now let me set the stage. I thought this family reunion would be just another gathering. Handshakes, polite small talk, maybe some forced laughter. But I was wrong, because in just a few minutes, I would be reminded of an outdated mindset that still clings to our culture like a shadow. And the person to challenge it? Not me, not my wife, but my mother. It started with a simple question from my cousin, a man who still believes a husband's worth is measured only by the money he brings home. A man who thinks a woman's role should be confined to housework and knowing her place. And in his mind, my wife wasn't pulling her weight. But what he didn't realize was that my wife wasn't just my partner. She was the reason our life worked. And before I even had the chance to defend her, my mother had already stepped forward, ready to set the record straight. I never thought much about the differences between my wife and me. At least, not in the way my extended family did. When we met in college, she was this determined, brilliant woman who had worked twice as hard as anyone else just to be there. While I had the privilege of growing up in a comfortable, upper-middle-class household, she had clawed her way out of a tough situation, juggling scholarships, side jobs, and endless late nights just to get through school. And despite all that, she was never bitter, never resentful. She just kept pushing forward, always with this quiet strength that I admired. My immediate family saw that too. They adored her. My mom, especially, always said she reminded her of what true resilience looked like. But my extended family? That was a different story. To them, it didn't matter how hard she worked, how much she contributed, or how deeply she cared. All they saw was where she came from. It started subtly, backhanded compliments, little remarks about how lucky she was to marry into a well-off family. Then, as the years passed, it turned into outright judgments. We had moved abroad shortly after getting married, building a life for ourselves, away from all the noise. We only visited twice in 14 years, so I had assumed, maybe foolishly, that those outdated mindsets had faded. But standing there at that reunion, I realized nothing had changed. My cousin, grinning like he had just made the joke of the century, didn't see the way my mother stiffened beside me. He didn't notice how our daughter, looked up, confused, as if she couldn't understand why her dad was suddenly the punchline of some archaic idea of masculinity. I clenched my jaw, forcing a laugh, trying to brush it off. But then he kept going. So, aside from being the breadwinner, you're also the maid? What does Elle even do? I heard she lives like a queen while you run around doing housework. That's when my mom snapped. I barely had time to react before my mom's voice cut through the air, sharp and unwavering. "Excuse me," she said, her tone laced with something that made my cousin smirk falter. "Did I hear you right? You're asking what my daughter-in-law does? Oh, honey, let me enlighten you." The room seemed to hush, just a little. Conversations around us carried on, but I could feel the weight of a few lingering glances. My cousin's wife shifted uncomfortably beside him, her eyes darting toward the exit, like she suddenly regretted standing next to him. I stole a glance at my daughter, her small fingers tightening around my hand. She wasn't old enough to fully grasp what was being said, but I could tell she understood enough. That was the part that really got to me, because in that moment, I wasn't just thinking about my wife. I was thinking about my daughter growing up in a world where men like my cousin still believed that a woman's worth was measured by how much housework she did. My cousin chuckled, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Relax, Auntie. I was just messing around." But my mom wasn't having it. She squared her shoulders, eyes locked on him. "No, you weren't. You meant every word. You think it's funny to imply that my son is less of a man because he helps out at home. You think it's an insult to suggest that his wife doesn't contribute just because she isn't scrubbing floors from dawn till dusk. Silence. I should have stepped in. I should have said something first. But my mom was already in motion, her words cutting through every ounce of ignorance like a blade. You want to know what Elle does? She continued, voice steady but fierce. She runs their entire household. She manages their finances, handles investments, keeps everything running smoothly so that my son can focus on his career. She fixes things around the house, plans every school event, makes sure their daughter has everything she needs. She cooks, she cleans when she can, and most importantly, she's a damn good wife and mother. And let's be clear about something. Just because a man shares responsibilities at home doesn't make him weak. It makes him a real partner. I had seen my mom get mad before, but never like this. Never this controlled, this deliberate. My cousin, suddenly at a loss for words, looked around as if expecting backup, but none came. His wife stayed quiet, her lips pressed into a thin line. Other relatives who had been within earshot suddenly found their drinks or phones incredibly interesting. And me? I just stood there, holding my daughter's hand a little tighter, because in that moment I realized something. I didn't need to defend my wife. She had already won. My cousin shifted uncomfortably, clearly caught off guard. He wasn't expecting a fight, just a few laughs at my expense, a quick moment of ego-boosting banter. But now, under the weight of my mother's words and the silence that followed, he looked exposed. Still, he wasn't ready to back down. Some men, especially those who build their self-worth around outdated ideas of masculinity, don't know when to stop. He forced out a chuckle, shaking his head like we were the ones being ridiculous. Look, Auntie, I get it. You want to defend your daughter-in-law, he said, his voice lighter now, like he was trying to smooth things over. But let's be real. M is the one bringing in the money, right? At the end of the day, he's the provider. That's what really matters. Everything else, that's just extra. I exhaled slowly, feeling my jaw tighten. This wasn't just ignorance, it was arrogance. My cousin didn't see a partnership. He saw a hierarchy. In his mind, as long as I was making money, nothing else I did at home mattered. And worse, nothing my wife did truly counted, because it didn't fit his definition of work. Before I could respond, my mom let out a dry laugh. Oh, you still don't get it, do you? She said, shaking her head. I could see it now. The way my mother's patience had completely evaporated. She wasn't just defending my wife anymore. She was speaking for every woman who had ever been dismissed, every wife who had been told her contributions were invisible, every mother who had raised sons only to watch them absorb the same tired, toxic beliefs she had spent her life pushing against. You think providing is just about money? She asked, tilting her head slightly. That's your problem. You think writing a paycheck is the only way to be a man, the only way to be valuable. But let me tell you something, Iho. If my son only brought in money and did nothing else, he wouldn't be half the husband or father he is today. I finally spoke, my voice calm but firm. You say I'm the provider, I said, looking my cousin in the eye. But what you don't see is that my wife provides, too, just in ways you refuse to acknowledge. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and unrelenting. My cousin opened his mouth, but no words came out. He glanced at his wife, maybe hoping for support, but she stayed quiet, her expression unreadable. And in that moment I knew, this wasn't just about me. It wasn't just about my wife. It was about an entire mindset that needed to die. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken words. My cousin shifted again, this time looking less sure of himself. Maybe he finally realized he had pushed too far. Maybe he was just trying to figure out a way to save face. Either way, my mother wasn't done. You men, she said, voice sharp, always act like housework is beneath you, like helping at home somehow makes you less of a man. But let me tell you something. Being a husband, being a father, isn't just about bringing home a paycheck and sitting back like a king. It's about showing up. It's about being a partner, not a boss. She wasn't yelling, but every word hit like a hammer. A few relatives nearby had stopped pretending not to listen. My cousin's wife had crossed her arms, staring at him with an expression I couldn't quite read. He opened his mouth to respond, but my mom held up a hand. "No, let me finish," she said, her tone final. "Because I want to be very clear. Elle is not living like a queen because she's lucky. She is living the way she deserves because she earned it. You think she sits around all day, spending my son's money? No. She handles their finances. She makes sure every dollar is accounted for. Every investment is working for them. She takes care of their home, not by scrubbing floors, but by making sure everything is in order, from repairs to paperwork. She runs the logistics of their life so smoothly that my son has the freedom to focus on his career. That's not being a queen. That's being a damn leader." A heavy silence followed. My cousin's smirk was long gone, replaced by something resembling unease. He glanced toward his wife, who still hadn't spoken. Maybe for the first time, he was realizing that the things he dismissed as extra were the very things that kept a household together. I looked down at my daughter. She was still holding my hand, her eyes wide, taking everything in. And I thought about the kind of world I wanted her to grow up in. A world where no one would ever question her worth just because she didn't fit into someone else's outdated mold. I turned back to my cousin, exhaling slowly. "You call it extra," I said, voice even. "I call it everything." That was it. That was the moment the conversation ended. Because what else was there to say? My cousin didn't respond. He just sat there, chewing on my words, probably trying to figure out how to spin this in his favor. But the damage was already done. The moment had shifted. Whatever point he thought he was making had crumbled beneath him, and he knew it. I could have let it go. I could have walked away and left him stewing in the uncomfortable truth my mother and I had just laid out. But something in me, maybe the years of hearing these kinds of comments, maybe the way my daughter was watching, wide-eyed, taking in every second, made me keep going. "You want to know what Elle does?" I said, my voice steady. "Fine. Let me tell you." I saw him glance toward his wife again. Maybe he was expecting her to jump in, to defend him, to back up his outdated views. But she stayed silent, her expression unreadable. And so I continued. "My wife is the reason our family runs the way it does," I said. "She handles everything, the finances, the bills, the investments, the paperwork. She's the one making sure we're covered, that our money is working for us, that we're secure. You know how many people struggle just to stay afloat because they don't have someone who knows how to plan ahead? She makes sure that never happens to us." I let that sink in for a moment. My cousin shifted again, clearly uncomfortable. "She's also the one who fixes things around the house," I went on. "I'm useless when it comes to repairs, but she can take apart a broken appliance and put it back together better than it was before. She's the one who keeps everything running smoothly, making sure nothing falls apart, physically, financially, emotionally." I could feel the weight of my words landing, not just on my cousin, but on everyone else who had been listening. And I wasn't done. "She's the one who organizes everything, vacations, schedules, school plans for our daughter. She makes sure nothing gets forgotten, that everything is handled. And on top of all that, she's the one cooking because, believe me, if I were in charge of meals." I took a breath, steadying myself. My cousin was quiet now, his usual cocky demeanor nowhere to be found. But I wasn't speaking just for him anymore. I was speaking for my wife, for my daughter, for every person who had ever had their worth measured by outdated, narrow-minded standards. "If I were in charge of meals," I continued, "we'd be eating rice and eggs for the rest of our lives. She's the one who cooks, keeps our home clean when she can, and takes care of the things I physically can't. I go to the gym, I lift, I train, but I have asthma. The moment I'm around dust or strong cleaning chemicals, I'm out. So she steps in, not because it's her job as a woman, but because she loves me, and she makes up for the things I can't do, just like I do for her." I glanced down at my daughter, still gripping my hand, her little brows furrowed in thought. This was why it mattered. The world she would grow up in would be shaped by the conversations we had today. "So yeah," I said, my voice calm but firm. "If that makes her a queen, she deserves it. And if helping out at home makes me less of a man in your eyes, then maybe you need to rethink what being a man actually means. The weight of my words settled into the silence that followed. My cousin's wife finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "That actually sounds fair," she said. Her tone was neutral, but I caught the way she looked at her husband, like she was seeing something in him she hadn't really noticed before. My cousin opened his mouth, maybe to defend himself, maybe to argue, but then he stopped. Maybe for the first time, he realized he had nothing left to say. And that was it. I didn't need to rub it in. I didn't need to keep going. The point had been made. Later that night, as we were getting ready to leave, my mom pulled me aside, a proud smile on her face. "You did good," she said. "Elle raised a king, too." That was all I needed to hear, because at the end of the day, my wife wasn't just my partner, she was my equal. And that was something no outdated mindset could ever change. So now, I want to hear from you. What do you think? Have you ever dealt with people who don't respect the balance in a marriage? Drop a comment below. I'd love to know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another thrilling story. See you in the next one.